Hey folks, welcome back to our Inside Battlefield podcast. My name is Tom, community manager here at DICE, and today I'm joined by Ben Walke and Alexander Formoso. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Well, hello, and definitely hello to our EA employee who is definitely not holding a gun to my temple.
Forcing you to be here.
But it's happy to be here.
I thought you wanted to be here with me, Alex. Come on.
I definitely am, sir.
So, folks, can you please introduce yourselves to our audience and what you do at DICE?
Can you go first? Okay, so I'm Alexander Formoso. I am the weapons designer at DICE. I am in charge of balancing and making the new weapons and picking the roster for the upcoming seasons, and that sums about it.
Yeah, and I'm Ben Walke. I'm a producer at DICE. I work on a couple of areas, but one of the areas that I do focus on and have done since launch is weapons. So happy to be here to talk about that today.
Welcome.
He's the guy that keeps me in check.
Okay.
I'm the grumpy one that says, no, we can't do this.
Ben, can I do this? No. Focus, Alex. Focus.
That's pretty much it.
Okay. So you heard it already. We're talking today about weapons. So that's the focus for today's episode. So we'll talk a little bit about weapon balance, where we feel it is as a team. We'll touch upon vault weapons, and we'll talk about just weapon design in general, how we craft and design our weapons, which I think is pretty interesting to dive into. Before we do so, let's take a quick look at what's available for play this week. So the weekly radar is, we have Exodus Conquest available again. We have Seasons Breakthrough, which also includes the Breakaway map, which we just reworked. We have the Battlefield World Tour, which is a combination of Conquest of Ages and Rush of Ages. So it's a cool mix of modes and maps. So I'm personally very much looking forward to this one. We have Team Deathmatch of Ages, which is, again, a mix of different map eras from Portal and All Out Warfare. We have Squitch G's Chaos returning, which has been a fan favorite so far. Ultimate Chaos. And obviously we have a new Friday Night Battlefield this Friday. I won't spoil it. Hope you will join us. It's a ton of fun every Friday. Folks, what are you looking forward to playing this week?
The Friday Night Battlefield, definitely. But I'm also not going to spoil it.
Yep,
we will not spoil it. Cool.
Yeah,
so,
no spoiling. We've been told no spoiling on this podcast.
No spoiling on this podcast. Okay, season 4 is around the corner. No spoiling. Okay. So, hopeful to see you on Friday. Are you ready to talk weapons?
I am, I think.
I think you were forced to be here. Okay. So let's start with weapon balance. So as a very easy intro, Alex, can you start off, and together with Ben, how do we review our weapon balance in general?
All right. Yeah. So it's a multiple approach to that, a multiple point approach. On one side, we begin with the community feedback that we receive either directly or through the community team. Then we compare that or contrast that to our statistics that we get, like the telemetry that we get from the game. And the telemetry, it's like more nuanced than just like what are the more popular weapons and so on, because it depends on your level and how much time have you been playing and your relative KD ratio and like skill metrics that we have for them. So people experience Battlefield differently depending on how good they are into the game or what role they like to play. And those are points that influence how we look at balancing. Like, it's not only if this is a weapon being used only by the better players, or how is this weapon being used, if it's being used outside of its role, and so on. So it's quite complicated.
Okay, and part of it is me coming to your desk every now and then, like, "Hey, Alex, show me some numbers."
Yeah.
Yeah. Ben, and from like as a producer, how do you play into that when reviewing what you want to do next, for example?
I like how you like phrase it at the start, like easy discussion on balance, when it's probably one of the most difficult things that we kind of do, even though on paper it is just numbers essentially and huge spreadsheets working stuff out. But I think Alex summed it up really well. Like we take a look at all the feedback that's coming in, like as we're making the weapons, like we're doing our internal play tests and getting feedback from the team and everything else like that. And then once they're launched, obviously getting feedback from players and seeing how they do in live, and is also, that's a different beast in itself. Like, it's, one, there's a lot more players compared to, team size. We'd love to have a team the size of our player base. And then there's also, like, as Alex said, like the way people play the game. Like, I tend to play support, so my weapon stats are probably completely different to somebody who plays assault, for example. And that's something we really have to take in. But usually for me, my first portal call is I'll get a Slack message or something, or you'll come and leave an unsavory note on my desk about, this, we've launched this weapon, please, let's do something about it. And then we, normally we've seen stuff already on that, but like the feedback we're getting from yourself and Kevin and everything else just helps validate what we want to do. And then it's okay, well, we can see this weapon isn't, it's either overperforming, underperforming, it's, we tweak this one, but then, okay, this weapon now has had a knock-on effect where everyone wants to play this weapon, but what does that mean for the weapons we've already launched? Yep. Like, it's a constantly shifting, like the foundation is constantly shifting. So it's always a back and forth between, trying to appease like what the current state is, but well aware that whatever we do today, next week the conversation starts again, because whatever we do is just going to have a knock-on effect. Yep. There will always be a meta. We cannot change that.
And you touched upon the meta there. So we released, by the time everyone listens to this, I think update 3.2 has been out for 2 weeks. Obviously, it's a major shift to gameplay with bringing back the class system. How has the meta changed so far in terms of weapons? I know like class picks have changed a lot. What have you guys seen for weapons?
So I will say that it's a little bit too early to draw conclusions of the data that we're getting, but at least what we have seen is that thanks to the weapon proficiencies, at least assault rifles are getting like more, their peak rate is higher now than it was before, at least compared to the other weapon archetypes. So I will say,
okay,
that's at least for now the main indicative that we have seen.
And that's a good thing in your opinion. Like if more people pick assault rifles.
I think it's an indicative that probably the weapon proficiency and the fact that the weapons are unrestricted and everyone can use them favors that type of weapon. And assault rifles in 2042 are like extremely all-rounders, so that they always do well. So yeah.
And I think as well, it's like it comes at the time of the season. Like 3.2 is the last major update of the season. We got 4.0 on the horizon, but for me, it's like I'm happy that we're still seeing like the weapons we released like season 3 are still up being used. Even season 2 weapons are still in there. It's not just the same ones the whole time. Every time we're doing something, it's shifting things up. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things change over the next 3 or 4 weeks once season 4 rolls out.
Yep, I'm very interesting to seeing that play out. You touched upon weapon proficiencies. How are you guys feeling about them so far? They're still very new as well, but what's your thoughts?
So from my side, I think that weapon proficiencies were one of the biggest home runs that we could do with a 3.2 update, with like the class rework, because the game foundationally was meant to have the weapons unrestricted. Like everyone can use whatever weapon they want to mix and match with their class and so on. And I know that that's not how it was in previous games before, but we had more reasons to do that than just the specialists being present in 2042, right? However, the proficiencies, that the new system that we have, like encourages you to pick something that pairs well with your character that you're picking, with your specialist. And I feel that positive reinforcement works much better than a hard restriction.
Do you feel like we obviously have a lot of feedback from players about weapon proficiencies. What I've seen so far on the community side is they like them. I think they're playing out pretty well. Can we expect further tweaks to how they work or anything there?
I'll say it's too soon to promise anything. We're getting the data. We know that some of them are not being taken advantage of as much as the others, so we will see.
Okay, thank you. Anything you want to add, Ben?
No, I think Alex sums it up nicely. Like, in terms of, like, it's a major change. Like, 3.2 was a huge change for the game. So I think the one thing we don't want to do is do a quick knee-jerk reaction and make things terribly bad. So I think we need to just let things settle, see how people play. I think once we see 4.0 launch as well and everything that brings with it, new weapons and, everything else, we'll start getting a lot more data, a lot more feedback, and then we can start seeing if, how, if what anything we want to, tweak and levers to pull on as we move forward.
And I think by the time this podcast goes live, we have an update going out the following day already with some balance tweaks to weapons. So obviously, we make a lot of changes and we continue monitoring the feedback, and weapon proficiencies fall into that. So maybe in the future, we can expect some changes there if we feel it's necessary. That brings us to just overall weapon balance. Alex, I'd love to hear from you. What is a weapon in-game right now where you are happy with its overall balance and how it plays out? Maybe it has a special place in your heart for whatever reason. I'd love to hear from you.
That's a good question. So, I'm not gonna answer with one. I'm gonna answer with several.
Yeah, that works.
Like, for example, my favorite weapon of the initial batch, it's the AC-42, the burst rifle, assault rifle. I love that so much because it's like very different. It cannot go into full auto, even if people want to have it in full auto. No, like, to me, it's a weapon that feels unique. It has a particular aesthetic that I like a lot, and it just sounds phenomenally. In regards to balance, for example, a weapon that is like performing exactly where it should in the place that it should be, I'll say it like the M5 or the AM40 that we released in season 2. Those are pretty much like spot on where they should be. Another example will be the SVK. I think the SVK is performing tremendously well on its niche. And aside from that, the PBX. After we hinted that the PBX was going to be one of the stronger picks of the SMG archetype, that's exactly what happened, and it's at least right now like the most picked. So yeah.
Sorry, the PBX is one of the most picked now.
The PBS, it is one of the most picked weapons, and it's the most picked submachine gun right now.
Because I think for quite a long time it flew under the radar quite a bit.
Completely, yeah.
Like it's always been very strong, and I think you've been on one of the Deaf Corner recordings before where you mentioned like, why is nobody playing the people? Why is nobody picking this?
And it also happens with others that I'm not gonna mention because I'm gonna let you guys
spoilers.
discover them or find their niche. But it's the nuance of making balance. Like, if you have something that it's tremendously strong, and then you look at the data and nobody's using it, then you go like, what do I do here? Like, I cannot keep buffing it in expectation that like people see it. Like, I cannot do something outrageous with it to bring it to the spotlight. I just need to wait until people figure it out. And then there's the others. There are some weapons that shouldn't be as picked as they are. Like, there is nothing in the numbers that justifies their usage. And then you see the data and it's like, okay, well, I guess people like that. I mean, the others are better. So
I think it's actually an interesting point to touch on. You mentioned some weapons have no point in being picked so much, but it's just sometimes a weapon just feels nice. Maybe it's not better than the other weapons, but it feels very nice.
Oh yeah, correct. Right. I'm no fun police, so I'm not
fun police.
Exactly. I'm not gonna say like man, people shouldn't be picking up this weapon. It's gonna nerf it. Like, no, not at all. But it's about like seeing the numbers, and you have like a grasp of how the weapons are going to perform, and then you see some that are not performing well. They're being picked insanely high numbers, and then you go like, what's happening here? so yeah, it's a fun one.
Okay. Anything?
For me, it's like I tend to go into like the feel of the weapon. I end up playing weapons that like I really like the feel and the sound and all that type of stuff. So I'm like a lot of the time with the BSV, for example, because like I just love that gun. It's like super good, like the way it sounds, the attachments, everything. Is nice. And then also I have a really good soft spot for the shotgun we added in season 3. It's just so satisfying just to run around a corner and just unload it into somebody and then just run around, reload, run around another corner into somebody else again. So yeah,
so good.
Like the shotgun we added in the season 3, it's different from the other shotguns as well. Like maybe for folks who haven't used it, you can give a quick refresher. Like it has some cool capabilities as well.
I mean, I can. The cool part about it is that now we're covering like the 3 main types of shotgun. Like we have your pump action, your semi-auto, and your full auto shotgun. And the season 3 one, the MVK S22, it's the semi-auto shotgun that it holds like 10 bullets, so it's like a lot of ammo at your disposal, and it can fire relatively quickly, and it's a monster in close combat quarter. So I think it's a pretty good weapon.
It's the big ammo that does it for me, because I have a terrible aim, so I just run in and just like unload the whole ammo in like in a fit of rage, and then hopefully hit somebody.
But if you do, then it's
if I do, then job's done. But even if I don't, it's just satisfying to unload the whole thing.
Awesome. So we talked about weapons we are happy with. What about a weapon where you feel the balance isn't as you wanted it to play out, Alex?
Damn, you're putting the spotlight on me hard.
Yeah. Let's go.
I have no, I mean, I can say probably the advances again.
Still,
yeah.
Okay.
Because the usage rating, the usage dropped. It's now in a place where it doesn't draw our attention that much. Like we don't see it as problematic. It's okay, but we know that we need to do something about LMGs and how they perform in the game. We need to find a good mix of all-rounder utility. Like I want you to be able to use your LMGs as another weapon and use it as an infantry weapon without limiting it to like, oh, you cannot ADS if you are not bipoded or like prone, or like I don't want to like artificially restrict their usage as an infantry weapon, but I do feel that we need to do something to bring them even further away from the assault rifles. And we did something like we are changing the way that their dispersion works, like how they control while you keep firing. But probably we haven't done enough of that. So we will see.
What about...
At this point, the advances is like the problem child.
It's a cool weapon, though.
Yeah, it is.
But also the problem child. Okay. And what about attachments? Like how we balance our attachments. I think we recently made a change to the drum magazines and extended mags.
Oh yeah, that one.
You promised you wouldn't bring this up, Tom.
I lied. Let's go.
That's fine.
Putting you on the spot again.
It's fine. So I think we mentioned it in the patch notes, right? But it's more about... I know that there has been a lot of comments pushing towards the idea that because they are bigger magazines, they should be slower to reload and they should have like a slower deploy time and so on. But that doesn't touch upon their problem, which is the amount of ammo that they give you substantially increase your in-combat time. So when you have a reduced magazine, you need to take decisions when you are in combat. You need to pick your fights. Who do you shoot? And when you have a big magazine, all this mental overhead just disappears because you can just like keep shooting and go like and ramble your way through the map. And we don't want that. At least not in agile weapons that shouldn't have those like large amount of bullets. So that change that we did was supposed to mitigate that. It was supposed to make you less effective in a duel situation, for example, that when you're not using them. However, we understand that it wasn't well received, and we understand that there's other approaches that we could have taken. And since this is life, and sometimes you shoot and you miss, well, this was a miss, and we will try to do it again in a future patch, no problem. But the main logic remains, right? Like, we're not satisfied with our combat uptime, and that's something that we need to mitigate.
Okay. So I think as a summary, like, we know that we needed to change something about them, and so this was the first change we made, was to change their aim down sight time, or to increase it. But it just didn't feel nice.
Yeah.
Even though, like, in theory, it would have been a good change. So no, like, I'm happy to hear you say that, Alex. Like, sometimes we try something, if it doesn't work, we'll just revert it. So that should that revert will go live in the next update, which should go live tomorrow by the time you listen to this. Excellent. But like always, subject to change. The patch notes should be available already on our website, so go check them out. It's a small quality of life update, so a few weapon balance changes in there. Anything you want to add, Ben?
No, I think you summed it up well. And I think the key thing from us is that, it is an iterative process. Yep. Like, we're going to keep trying doing things. The one thing we don't want is just to say, okay, this is done, and then, and move on. Like, if we see room for improvement, we'll want to try that. And we also don't want to be boxed in by only, playing it 100% safe 100% of the time. We are going to try new things.
Yep.
Try and, make changes where possible. And, sometimes that's, that it's not going to work out, as we've seen recently, and, we'll act on that and revert and change and whatever. But sometimes it is going to work. So it's just one of those things that we'll keep doing as we go on through, like, weapon releases, attachments, and everything else.
Great. So that was, I think, a nice discussion and overview about how we view our weapon balance and like how we go about making changes there. I would love to move us on to vault weapons next.
Oh boy.
Vault weapons isn't something that we have done before in Battlefield, so I'd love to hear from both of you. How did they come about? Like, what was their design thought about bringing them over to all-out warfare? And maybe what are we looking at next for vault weapons? Let's start with Ben.
So you say that, we've not done it before, but like, in truth, like, it was something that we didn't actually plan, like, for this game. Like, going through, running up to launch, we had our weapon roster for, like, Portal, for all-out warfare, and then we hit launch, and then all of a sudden we started getting all this community feedback, like, bring Portal weapons into all-out warfare. So it's like, okay, well, what can we do there? Because, the weapons haven't necessarily been built or set up for that. We haven't taken into account, like, these weapons are made for Portal specifically, not for necessarily, to sit alongside all-out warfare launch weapons. So it's like we had to make the decision about how, bring those over. Then obviously we have all, like, the boring stuff we won't go into, like, like the actual tech and implementation and all this type of thing. But mostly it became a thing of, like, just the sheer amount of feedback we were receiving on it meant, okay, well, let's act on it. But then it became a bit of a question of how do we act on it? And it's like, we had multiple ways of doing it. It's like one, and the route we ended up obviously taking was like, okay, we can start pushing these weapons out in small batches quite early on, within, what was it, Season 2 was the first patch we did when they come out. So we just started doing it that way. But then also there was the whole question of, like, attachments, universal camos, all this type of stuff as well. So it's like a case of, well, yes, in theory it's possible for us to put 2042 attachments onto the vault weapons, but then it becomes a trade-off of, do we want to wait before we've done the necessary work to get all that in place, or do we want to put weapons out? So it becomes it's one of those times where you have to make a decision, and it's it's like asking to choose between your kids. Basically, there's probably no wrong or right answer.
Yep.
But it's like, so we had to choose between, do we want to release the vault weapons when we did, as we did, or did we want to just hold off completely until we potentially added attachments and skins. So I think overall, it's been, I wouldn't say, for me personally, I'm 100% happy with the way they've performed. I think it's, they've had some challenges along the way. I think it's got better as we've got more used to the system and everything else. But hopefully in the future, we'll see a lot more improvement as things come to light and fruition.
Yeah, well, what Ben said, basically, when we launched, like, the overwhelming piece of feedback that we had was there are not enough weapons. So we prioritized everything on the pipeline to expedite them as much as we could. So it was like, okay, so let's just do as many as we can, as fast as we can. Let's increase the roster amount as soon as we can. And then when we reach a certain amount, when we reach a certain volume, then we can take a look at what are the next steps.
Are you personally happy with how many we have now? Because I think we added a bunch over the updates. I don't know how many it is. I actually haven't counted them before we recorded this, but I think it's more than 10.
It's close to it's around 20-ish, depending on when.
Oh, that's way more than I thought.
Yeah, I might be taken into by 20-ish. Might be taken into account the ones we have planned for season 4.
Exactly,
as well.
the ones that are in production now.
Yeah, that we're in production now. But yeah, it's a lot.
Yep, cool.
And of course, I think that during season 4 we will reach like a comfortable amount of weapons, closer to like other games, other previous titles and so on.
But I think there's if you go into All Out Warfare now, there's a lot of choice about what you want to play with, and playing with all the weapons, it will take you quite a while because you need some playtime to get the feel of a weapon, maybe get used to it, like find your fit there. What I would love to hear from you for Vault Weapons as well is how did we go about picking the specific ones that we brought into like update? Why did we bring this gun first? Why not that one? Anything you want to share there?
I think there wasn't a big decision making or like a complex decision making process. I think that we only decided on like, okay, so let's let's try to not do dupes. So like not 2 assault rifles or 2 LMGs on the same patch. And then from there, I remember the beginning, we needed the M60 because we only had 2 LMGs at launch, plus the advances coming in. So we needed the M60 to just like pump the amount of LMGs available. But after that, I think we just went picking one by one from a list that we had. So it wasn't a bunch of like, what do we need next? We do that with the seasonal weapons, though.
So I don't want to say you picked favorites, but you did because you picked the ones you want to see next.
Absolutely picked favorites.
There's 100% people on the team going, like, even when we came up with like the roadmap for Vault Weapons all the way up into season 4, like people will come in and go, oh yeah, but what about this? Can we get this in? So yeah.
Awesome. Anything else you wanna share for Vault Weapons before we move on? What you're hoping to see in the future?
I am hoping that we will have enough time to just bring them more closer to the All Out Warfare offerings. Not only in like what can you do with them on the metagame layer of the game, but also how they perform in-game. Currently, there are some Vault Weapons inside the most popular weapons of the game, across several skill gaps.
Can you say which one's the most popular?
I will not say them.
Okay.
But I can say like there are 2 that are like solidly cemented in there. And I think that if we do some adjustments, we can have more of them in that list.
Okay. But it's good to see that Vault Weapons are amongst the most popular.
Some of them.
But okay, that means they found their their niche, their use within the all-out warfare arsenal.
Yeah, and I think the key thing as well on Vault Webs now, as we are, hitting towards that 20 number, it's like it's becoming, okay, what do we do? Like, there becomes a critical mass that we hit, and it becomes, a point where it's just, okay, this is just another weapon into the pool.
Yep.
So I think the key thing is, like Alex is saying, it's like, bringing them more in line with the all-out warfare weapons and like the seasonal ones that we've launched, as well as looking, I know attachments and skins are firmly like two of the most requested things we've seen to date, and still keep getting the notes left at my desk, attachments when, from yourself. So it's like, things like that are on, are top of our list as well of things that, we really, really want to do.
And you got to also remember that Vault Weapons represented a big change in the philosophy of how we treat weapons. Because, for example, like Season 1 weapons, right? Like we had the BSV, and the BSV was the first weapon where we tried to say, like, okay, so it had a direction where how much can we push the plus menu, right? Like how much can you shift a weapon from another? And the real life version of the VSB is just two weapons, right? It's a small carbine and it's a DMR. So we tried to do that with the analog, with the VSB, and it worked. It was received very, very good. And then you had the crossbow with like the explosive bolt and so on. So it was like a far cry like the other weapons, right? So they were different. And then comes Season 2, and we say, okay, so what are we going to do for Season 2? Okay, we're going to do hybrids. Let's try to do like what do you put in the middle between an assault rifle and an LMG? And then there's the advances. What do you put in between an SMG and an assault rifle? And that's the AM. So they were like all about the hybrids, like what sits between the two categories and how much can we push the identity of the weapon that just sits in the middle. Then comes Season 3, and it's like, oh, futuristic stuff, and you have the Rorsch, and it's like completely different to before. So that's kind of the goal that we wanted for like the seasonal weapons of 2042. And Vault Weapons ain't that, right?
Yep.
So it's
but they're different. Yeah.
Exactly.
They're different.
So it was a shift in philosophy of like, okay, so we need to do this.
I'm actually curious because you touched upon our seasonal weapons there. How do we go about picking, like, what do you want to do for like the next season? Because it's like we always try to make them nice and special. They're always cool new things that we haven't seen before in all out warfare. Like for the Season 1, you had the BSV who could change between automatic, semi-automatic. Then we had the AM40, which was a mix between SMG and assault rifles. And then we had the cool shotgun in Season 3, which is, and obviously the Rorsch, which, that got quite a lot of feedback, but I just am unable to use myself because it's actually a very difficult gun to use.
But you said in burst mode.
Wreck people with, but yeah, like how do we go about picking like what we want to do next? How do you think about this?
So it's it's about having the different elements of the weapons and thinking how can you push them individually like further away. So it's about, you have the plus menu. Okay, so how much can we transform a weapon using the plus menu? And then you have the PSB. Then you go from another, like, okay, so we have these archetypes, and inside the archetypes, we have certain values that we say, okay, so this is what we consider an assault rifle to be, and this is what we consider an SMG to be. What can we put in the middle? And so it's about grabbing those columns, those elements, like the particles that make a weapon, and saying like, okay, so let's focus in one of them, right? So Season 3 was like, okay, so futuristic stuff, what it's the, like, how can we push this idea of like techie? And then the whole Nordvik helped us with like, okay, so can we bring the Rorsch back? It wasn't the previous title. So it's all picking individual elements, looking how to elevate them, and then going from there.
And from the producer side, anything?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time it also, like, some season, obviously each season has like, a theme around it and everything else. Like Season 3 is a really good one because, like, futuristic or maybe not futuristic's the right word, but like high tech type stuff. We saw that with the vehicle we brought in as well. So like aligning our weapon choice around that, it helps us narrow it down, slightly. It's like if we were to do a close quarters season, we wouldn't fill it up with sniper rifles and stuff like that, for example. So it's just about finding the right balance, and then obviously looking as well, like what weapons we currently have in the roster, like any pools we want to add to. Like Alex was saying at launch, like LMG was a little bit light, so that's when we prioritize vault weapons to come into that, and I think now it's in probably a good spot. So just making sure we're not stacking up, and then where possible trying not to do too many duplicates per season as well. So like if we don't want to do like shotgun in every single season, even though I would probably quite like that. I'm pretty sure. Like,
if it's up to me, we just have only shotguns.
There's probably a Reddit thread spinning up right now. It's like, screw this producer, he's ruining the game. So like we take that into account as well, and then like it's quite it becomes quite a collaborative process around for quite a few people that touch weapons as well. So it's not just like me and Alex sitting there going, yeah, we want this, screw this guy, he likes this, but he's not getting this. But it's like everyone's coming into it, like our 3D art team, animation, audio, like VFX, the whole lot, and saying, have we seen this weapon? This weapon's just been announced in real life. Is there something we could do similar to here, and all this type of stuff? So it's there's a lot of like the gif of like pinpointing on the map and everything else, like the meme of that. It's pretty much, there's a lot of that going on.
Okay, but
I don't want to say this with 100% confident, but I am like 90% confident that we have to be the internal team that receives more requests for content from other teams that there is in DICE, because we get constantly pinged by anyone in the studio going like, either when is the weapon that I want coming back, or have you seen this YouTube video of like the new weapon being manufactured?
And your answer is always yes. Exactly, I have seen it. Yes.
So it's like,
yes.
When is your favorite weapon coming back? I don't know. Have you seen this video of that? Yes, I have seen it. And it's like, or either go into the meme territory, right? Like, when are we bringing back the bipod knife? So it's like, man, I don't know what to tell you, right? So it's more nuanced than that. But we definitely get like requests both internally and externally for everything. So yeah,
it's not even just within the studio as well. Like our other studios within EA, like we'll get pinged by people, like whether it's people from Apex or whatever, or whoever it might be, like, oh yeah, I've been playing the season, this gun's really good, but
what about
have you thought about this? And that's not taking into account all the player feedback. Like drop a thread in Discord, Reddit, or Twitter or whatever, and just say, what weapon would you add to Battlefield if you could? Like, you're going to get 100 different answers.
Yeah, you get 300 comments, and there are 300 different answers. Yeah, it's like, God damn it.
And every answer is the right answer to the person that made it, and because it's a personal thing.
The final question from my end there is, how do you end up making that decision? Like, how do you, like, okay, this is the one with all the other good ideas and thoughts you probably have about a specific weapon, but you can only pick like 3 for a season.
In the end, it's what benefits the product.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always the player experience. Even though like a lot of the time people will think like, we're doing this because we want to do it, and yes, that does come into it some of the time. But there's always a lens being applied of what's the benefit to the player here.
Yep.
Like if we do this weapon, how the player is, how is it going to affect the gameplay experience for the player? And ultimately, that's what we care about the most.
I think it's time for some cookies then.
All right. Looking forward to this.
So, cookie of the week. Best section of the show, what everybody obviously listens for. What do we have?
How are these called?
It is called
Dromar.
Dromar.
No, you're exaggerating. It's just Dromar.
It's just Dromar. I don't speak Swedish, but I'm gonna take a bite and see what it's like. Ben, are you feeling like cookies this morning?
I always feel like cookies.
What? No way.
Dreams. It translates as dreams.
So, yeah, just the cookie, it translates into dreams. So we're sitting here on a fine Wednesday morning eating cookies made of dreams. Wow. Okay.
This is good stuff.
Yeah, it's your classic vanilla-ish tasting cookie, I guess.
What do you call this?
I don't know how to explain it, but it's a good one.
It's a good crunchy texture.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sugar in this.
There is a lot of sugar.
Like, the podcast for the next 20 minutes, like the energy level is going to be...
It's going to increase.
It's going to increase as we go along. This is...
For the Spanish speakers, this is just a Swedish suspiro.
I mean,
but it's a good shit.
One thing I've learned recently is that Swedes do seem to love their treats or their sugary things. There's I think we have multiple holidays for celebrating cookies and
it's Semledagen next
Semla.
week or in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, apparently it was carrot cake day last week or something.
I just learned that there is a mud cake, like a chocolate brownie cake day, and it's oh hell yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things I move into Sweden. It's everyone gets a name day, which was a bit of an alien concept for me. But also cakes. Cakes get their own special day, and it's everyone goes hard on the cakes on those days.
And I'm all for it. Sorry, cookie stuck in my throat. But yes. So we've covered weapon balance, fault weapons. I would love to kind of dive into the whole design aspect for weapons. I think let's start with the Rorsch. How did we go about designing this weapon? Because it's very different than what we have in game. It is high tech. It is pretty cool. Can you talk more about the design process and how did it came about?
I like that you begin with let's start with the most difficult one.
Yeah, exactly. Alex, I'm not here to make your life easy. Especially with the first easy question about how do you balance your weapons, bro? Yeah. So let's okay.
So okay, do you want to begin, Ben, or?
Yeah, I can begin.
Yeah.
That cookie is literally just sucks all the moisture out of your mouth.
Yeah,
It's like a sponge.
I like it, but yep, I needed some water after.
Yeah,
good cookie though.
Yeah, good strong cookie though, but probably a 7 out of 10 overall. No, but I think the Rorsch is an interesting one. I think it's one that we had the idea of we wanted to do it for a while, and it's one of the weapons that probably changed the most over the development of it. We went through so many iterations of what we wanted to, wanted it to be. I'll let Alex talk to that in a bit, but it's we did stuff and then put it into play tests, see how it feels, and it's okay, let's, make some tweaks here. And then by the end of the process, when it comes to actually releasing, it's completely different from the original intent. But I think it, what we ended up launching with is great, and I think it's part of the parcel of going through the whole iterative process with stuff. And it's also a lot different to what we had done elsewhere in the seasons. It's not, as I was calling it, it's not just a bullet and bang bang gun. It's it's something vastly different.
Out of curiosity, sorry to interrupt, can you talk maybe a little bit of one of the earlier iterations? What was it? What was the first idea we had for this weapon?
Oh, man.
Do we want to go there?
Okay, so when we begin making weapons, there is a couple of days where it's only about research, right? How does this work? How does it look? How does it sound? Who has it? And so on. And the railgun was a very fun one because you have real railguns that exist, but they're mounted on ships, on warships. So it's okay, we cannot definitely not use those. And then there is already portable railguns of this type, like the Rorsch, but they are vastly different to what we needed for the game, right? They are definitely advancing in tech, but they are nowhere near what we need them for the game to be. So we went okay, so what are the cool components of this weapon? and we went into the science of it, like how does it work? And then we began talking about battery capacities. We talked about like charge times. We talked about energy mitigation, about like temperature control. So it was like it had, I think, at its worst, it had like 7 moving parts that you had to control to actually use the weapon. So it was about like, oh, depending on the battery type that you get a different charge time. So there was one battery that like charged fast at the beginning, and then if you release the trigger, then you shot. So like the longer you kept the trigger held, the harder it hit. So it was like, okay, so how do you communicate that your damage is not as good as if you keep holding it? And then that one had overheat on it. So it's like, oh no, if you're holding your trigger too much, then it overheats and then you cannot shoot again. So it was way more complex than it had any right to be. And again, we started cutting, and then we said, oh, we already cut the overheat component, and then we already cut the hold to try. But now it's too simple. Now it became just a cool looking rifle. So now we need to bring something back. And then, oh, we cannot cut that because it has a screen. What are we going to do with the screen? So that was another whole discussion of like, do we put an ammo counter in there? Do we use it as the charge meter? If it's the charge meter, then what happens in ADS if you cannot see it? So it's a...
Sounds like a lot of research, a lot of changes. It's not easy, and at some points, like obviously you test it in game, and I guess some of the iterations probably didn't just feel fun either.
No, especially like the bloated ones.
Yeah. So Ben, we just talked a little bit about the research and the iterative process. Can you expand on it?
Yeah. So like, research comes in like many forms, and I think one of the interesting things is like, if you take a look at my YouTube history and Google search has definitely got me on a list somewhere, the type of list that you probably don't want to be on. Like if I load up YouTube now, you'll just see like, here's latest music video from whoever, here's gun, latest gun news coming out, come to this gun fair and buy this gun. Like the artillery systems, tanks, it's all terrible. And because I used to work with the narrative team as well, so I'd be like researching things like human migration patterns, like refugee type stuff, and then like you look back on Google at the end of the day and it's like, oh yeah, this is some bleak stuff that I'm looking at here, and definitely somebody on the other end of my IP address is like, okay, what on earth is this person
guy doing
up to in this small, sleepy suburb of Stockholm?
So yeah, Ben, that covers the research part, and I think our teams do that in parallel. Like when you do your research from the production side, you from the design side, but we have our audio animation teams. They are not here with us today, but maybe you can speak a little bit more about like how that comes in from their perspective.
Yeah, they definitely have their work cut for them because especially like we were talking about the Roche, right? So it's even more emphasized with that weapon because it becomes of like, how does a railgun sound? And then you have like these massive ship-mounted weapons, and you're like, okay, I cannot use that. And then you go to the modern ones that are being produced, and they sound like a bad car, like a pretty bad electric car. So it's not fun. It doesn't inspire anything on you, especially not compared to like a regular firearm.
Yep.
So it's becomes a whole task of how can we reframe this? How can we make this sound video gamey? How can we make this weapon make the player feel something, right? And it's the same with animation. Like, especially with Roche, we don't know how the weapon was going to look like at the end. We had a lot of iterations of like, where do we put the batteries, and can we put the batteries on the plus menu, and how will the soldier like quickly swap them inside the battlefield? Like, how can this make sense in a real world? And then animators had also to accommodate for that. Like, where do you put the hands? How do you grab the batteries? Like, for example, the Roche has a super cool detail that when you open the plus menu, the soldier slides the battery pack out while you're looking at the attachments. And that's like in preparation of like, hey, if you're going to swap the new battery pack, it's just going to slide it in. It's super cool to see.
I think that covers the design part pretty well. It's a good overview. Before we move on, is there anything you would still want to add or touch upon from like your design perspective?
I don't think I want to add anything from design, but it's more about you could probably you can easily underestimate the amount of people involved into shipping a weapon. Not just like the material thing that you interact with, but also like the whole backend part and like UI icons and so on. So it's a lot.
It's a lot of work to get to the final product. No, I think that context is interesting to have, because you probably don't think about that or notice that when you just hold the weapon in game. Like, it's in your hands, it looks very straightforward. It's this weapon, some skins, some icons, but there's a lot of work from multiple teams involved in getting it onto the battlefield.
Yeah.
So I hope we were able to give you a little bit of an overview about how the process works. Which brings us to what else? What do we have upcoming? Like, Season 4 is on the horizon.
Season 4. I like how you both look at me and say, what can we talk about here as the producer in the room? Season 4 is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I don't know technically how much we can talk about. I think the one thing that I can say is that we're going to have 4 weapons this season, which is something we challenged ourselves and, sat down with the team and said, okay, can we do this? Can we, we have this list of weapons that we would really like to do. But I know Alex is incredibly fond of one of them in particular, which I'll let him talk about in a minute. But I think Season 4 is shaping up really nicely, I think. And so it's, by the time this comes out, we must only be a couple of weeks away from impending reveals and trailers and stuff. And like, we've all seen the trailer already that's going to be coming out. And it obviously, our trailer team has done fantastic work, as always. Cool. It's really cool. I'm really looking forward to seeing, the 4 new weapons get. In addition to I think we've got 2 vault weapons coming in at the start of the season as well. So there's going to be 6 weapons in total for people to play around with, which is really nice.
I don't think we've had that many in previous seasons.
No, this is the biggest one.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And you are also excited, Alex.
Oh, man. I need to keep legal away from me because I cannot talk about this, but Season 4 has my favorite weapon. Okay. One that, like, during the whole timeline for Season 4, that's probably the only one that I'm going to be using. I love everything about it, like from how it plays and how it sounds and the unique gimmick that it has. Then the other weapons are also fun, but they're not my favorite one. And one of them is like super. So yeah, it's great. It's gonna be great.
Sounds like a lot to look forward to.
It is.
I know you are excited.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited myself as well. It's not too far away now. So I think that brings us to the close of this episode. Is there anything you guys still want to talk about that's on your mind when you are here to talk about weapons?
No, we really appreciate everyone's feedback. We're hearing you, and please keep it going because that helps us like steer the direction of where we want to take this thing. At the end of the day, we're making the game for the audience, like for the players to have. So it's important to keep them in the loop and to know what they want.
Yeah, I think that sums it up nicely, really. Like, I think, as people can see, like, as we've moved on through the seasons, we've been making more balanced changes. I think the patch that is due to go out the day after this airs is another, there's some stuff going into there. And we'll keep, we're going to keep iterating. So as Alex says, like, keep feedback flowing, coming in, leaving post-it notes on my desk and everything else. And yeah, we'll keep doing what we can.
I guess I have a final comment. Like, those mini patches that we do in between now, mini updates, like, they came about from player feedback who, when we have like a big update, like, Season 3 or update 3.1, they had feedback and we wanted to act on that feedback faster, and players wanted to see us act on it faster. So now we have those mini updates in between where we can actually be much more agile with making weapon changes if we see it necessary. So I'm personally very happy that we do that now, and the next one is coming out subject to change, but it's planned for tomorrow as we are recording this.
But I think what you're saying is, you could talk for hours on just patches, but from a player experience, it's yes, a patch arrives, your console PC downloads it, and away you go. But what you don't see, and similar to what Alex was saying about the weapons, the amount of people involved with that, the amount of people involved to get a patch out is huge. It's making sure everything's working. We want to make, the last thing we want to do is drop a patch and then something horrendous breaks, and then it puts us in firefighting mode, and it snowballs out of control. So I think it's small patches like this are a considerable effort for a lot of people on the team to get in. A lot of people that most people probably don't know exist, all our tech teams. A lot of QV time and effort goes into ensuring that we can get these smaller patches out. So huge shout out to everyone on the team who allows us to tweak balance and stuff in this way.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, completely.
That said it very nicely. Okay, folks, so that's what we have for you today. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. As a reminder, you can reach out to us on podcast@battlefield.com if you have any questions, feedback. We'd love to hear from you. You can also reach out to us on social channels via #InsideBattlefield. So Ben and Alex, thank you so much for being here today. I personally had a lot of fun talking weapons with you. So I hope we can do it again in the future. And to everyone listening, see you in the next one. We'll sit down with the Maps team. Looking forward to that discussion as well. And keep playing the objective.
And remember, guys, pineapple does not go on pizza.
Oh, God, let's not go there.
You're gonna cut that.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye, folks.